Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at a relatively brand new pistol caliber carbine on the US market. This is the MDP-9 made by Angstadt Arms out of North Carolina. Now what makes this interesting to me is that it is a roller delayed 9mm carbine, which is not exactly newfangled technology. That's the exact same mechanism as the vaunted H&K MP5 submachine gun used. What's really interesting to me is we've seen an explosion in the last few years in popularity of 9mm carbines on the civilian, recreational, and sport shooting markets, because as it turns out, shooting 9mm out of a carbine is really a tremendous amount of fun. You can shoot really fast and really accurately, and it looks great on Instagram, and frankly, it's just a lot of fun. And so we've seen things like pistol caliber carbine, or PCC divisions, explode in popularity in sports like USPSA. As a result, of course, a whole bunch of 9mm carbines have come on the market to meet the newfound demand for this style of firearm. Now, most of these have been simple, straight blowback systems. That's what's easy to make, and a 9mm carbine has no trouble functioning just great as a simple blowback action. The idea there is just that the bolt itself is heavy enough that its inertia keeps it closed long enough when you fire for the bullet to leave the barrel and pressure to drop, and then the action will open safely and eject the empty cartridge. This is something you can't do with a rifle because rifles have a lot more pressure in them than a simple 9mm pistol cartridge. Now, the downside is once that 9mm simple blowback bolt gets going, it's typically relatively heavy and it's moving relatively fast, and even if you have a fairly stout recoil spring, it's going to slam into the back of the receiver of whatever the action is. Usually these are AR15 style carbines, but not always. There's 9mm stuff out there, or AK style stuff out there, and other platforms. But usually that simple blowback system is going to give you a significant jolt that's going to cause the muzzle to move, and it's going to make it harder to shoot the gun fast and accurately. And so we have seen a further development of a bunch of delayed blowback 9mm carbines. Now, the 9mm pistol cartridge is generally a bit underpowered to use in something like you would actually have in a full-fledged proper rifle. You're not really going to see gas piston operated 9mm carbines because the cartridge just doesn't generate enough gas to make that a practical reality. However, 9mm is a perfect cartridge for delayed blowback systems, be they lever delayed, gas delayed. I don't know of any recently developed lever delayed ones, but there are some historic lever delayed ones. Gas delayed we actually see in pistols as well, things like the Laugo Alien, and of course roller delayed. Radial delayed, by the way, CMMG came out a few years earlier than this with a radial delayed 9mm carbine, and then we have roller delayed. So I'll show you exactly what roller delayed actually is when we take this apart in just a moment, but it's the same system as the MP5. By being delayed blowback, this should make the gun a little bit lighter and also have a little bit less felt recoil than a simple blowback gun. Now, Angstadt was formed in 2014. They made AR-15s, and then they started doing a 9mm simple blowback carbine, which is their UDP-9, and they evolved from that to developing it into this, the MDP-9 with the delayed blowback system. And for what it's worth, this is about half a pound lighter than their comparable simple blowback design. So let's go ahead and break this open and take a look at how it actually works. The MDP-9 comes in a couple of different configurations straight from the factory. This is a registered short-barreled rifle, but they also offer it with a pistol brace or with no stock or brace of any sort at all. This is simply a bolt-on stock. There's a piece of Picatinny rail on the back of the receiver, and this isn't quite actually a typical Picatinny attachment. We've got a cross bolt there, and then I can pull that off. This is a bit worn because I've put 500 or 1,000 rounds through this thing already, but this stock just clamps down in place, so you tighten that screw, and you're going to clamp these two sides together to tighten it up. The stock itself is actually made by Lage Manufacturing, right there. One of the other cool things about the stock is you can flip the stock over and then you can actually unscrew the buttstock portion from the hinge right here, flip this piece over as well, so this can fold to the left or to the right, whichever you like. I actually prefer the setup that it came in because as a left-hander, my face is on this side and I'm not hitting anything on the hinge there. So that's an option, but you can swap it around if you prefer it the other way, which is cool. Should you choose to run this just as a pistol with nothing coming off the back, you can attach a single point sling. This is a standard QD socket right there. The stock came set like this. I moved mine all the way down to the bottom position like so, and that allows me to mount an optic up here without any riser attachment. I instead just moved the stock down instead of moving the optic up, which I like, makes things nice and pretty compact. So that's what I chose to do there. Before we go further, a quick look at the markings. It is marked Angstadt Arms, Charlotte, North Carolina, there on the right. On the left, it does not say MDP-9, it says model AA0940 caliber multi and a serial number. And the reason for this is the roller delayed element here is the upper receiver. The lower receiver is the exact same one, I believe, that they use for their simple blowback UDP-9s. It's like there's nothing different in the lower, and so they actually have a lower receiver that has a different model number, model designation, and it's a universal lower for a variety of different uppers. In fact, interestingly, it doesn't say MDP-9 on it anywhere that I can find, which surprised me a little bit. Standard AR15 grip, standard AR15 trigger components. However, they do say that there is a limited assortment of triggers that are compatible with this system, and that's because it is 9mm and it the bolt interfaces with the hammer a bit differently than on 5.56 and other rifle caliber platforms. If you go to Angstad's website, they have a list of a couple triggers that are specifically recommended and a couple that are specifically not compatible, but you can't just assume it will take any AR-15 rifle hammer and trigger and fire control parts. As for magazines, this is designed specifically for Glock magazines, and it comes with two 27-round Magpul Glock mags. This is, in my mind, definitely not the best magazine to use in terms of the magazine by itself, but it is almost certainly far and away the most popular magazine and the most common magazine, and so that's why they went ahead and used it. It would have been nice, I think, just for the gun itself, if it were set up to use something like Scorpion magazines or, frankly, MP5 magazines, but the market dictates a lot of these sorts of things, and thus we get Glock magazines. The controls are not ambidextrous. We have a magazine release paddle over on this side, safety, and bolt, hold open, and release on this side. And that brings us to an interesting point. That lower receiver is designed with the components to lock open on an empty magazine. However, in my experience, it does so kind of only sporadically. So I scrounged up all the Glock magazines that I had on hand, and I figured we'll take a quick run through them here. Some of these are actual Glock metal-lined proper magazines. Some of them are just solid polymer Magpuls. And let's see. So that one does not lock open. That one does. That one does. That one does not. That one does. That one does not. That one does. And that one does not. And in my experience out at the range, it's not specific to an individual magazine. Some mags will work sometimes and not work others. I suspect it has to just be tolerances with the lever there that acts on the hold open and position of the magazines in the magwell. There is a little bit of play with magazines in here. And the interaction of all these things together results in the hold open feature doesn't always work. All right, now on to disassembly. This is quite simple. We're going to simply pull the pin out. It is a captive pin, which of course people love. Once you take the rear pin out and pivot the upper receiver up, you can then take this, push it in just slightly. When it's in the gun, that little tab sits in that little recess and locks it all in place. And then I can pull out the entire bolt and carrier and recoil spring, all the innards. That's everything. Literally, that's everything that makes the gun work. We have a captive recoil spring up there, bolt carrier, bolt head. There's a little wire in here that is sort of well, it holds the bolt head in the correct orientation, but it also allows you to pop it out for disassembly. So if I pull the bolt head forward, I can just rotate it counterclockwise, pull off the bolt head, pull off the half-locking wedge, the firing pin spring, and the firing pin. And now I just have an empty bolt carrier here. So the way roller delayed systems work is that the bolt head has rollers, usually two. Actually, there are some systems that have one, but this is a two-roller system, which is by far the most common. We then have a locking wedge, or delaying wedge, and these two surfaces right here and right here are going to push the rollers out of the bolt head when the thing is assembled. If I put it in from the right side, there we go. So with the bolt all the way backwards, these rollers are pushed out. They're going to lock into recesses in the trunnion of the gun, specifically that recess and that recess. And as you can imagine, as long as those rollers are locked into the sides of the receiver, the bolt can't go backwards, it can't open. So what's going to happen instead is the pressure that's being pushed back here by the firing cartridge is going to push on these rollers, which are in turn going to push on those two angled surfaces. That's going to essentially turn a force that has just a rearward vector into one that is both pushing inward on these rollers and also backwards on the bolt. And what will happen is it will force this rear wedge backward like that, which allows the rollers to come in. And once they're fully in, then the whole bolt can move backwards. The practical, the upshot of this is that the bolt opening takes a little bit more time than it would if it were just a big heavy lump of metal, and thus it opens slowly, or it takes more time than if it were just this lump of metal without any delaying mechanism. And the result is a safe operating carbine. We can go into a little more depth here by removing the front takedown pin, also captive. There we go. So there's the magazine well in the lower, and you can see this lever is the magazine hold open component, which sits on the front front of the follower tab of the magazine and lifts up the bolt hold open back here. Fire control parts, of course. There is no buffer on this because it doesn't have a traditional AR15 style recoil system. So nothing back there, and allows you to have a folding stock of your choice. The charging handle is non-reciprocating and lives up here in the front of the handguard, rather like the MP5. This is interchangeable left to right. So I already put it on the left to fit me. But if you want to change it, all you have to do is back out this little set screw there, and then you can pull out the charging handle and put it back in the other side. So I'm going to leave this on the left because that's how it works best for me. I will point out that there is nothing mechanically locking this set screw in place, so I would recommend Loctiting it, or if you don't, pay close attention to it, because if that screw walks out, your charging handle is going to go flying out of the gun at some point, and that'll be awkward. You may have noticed on the outside of the gun there are a whole bunch of screws. Those hold in a pair of rails right there and right there, which are used to guide the bolt carrier. So it's an aluminum extruded, I assume extruded, receiver with steel rails in it to avoid long-term wear from the steel bolt carrier. This guy right here is the ejector, which is built into the upper. So it's spring-loaded there, so when the bolt goes back, or when the bolt goes forward, it pushes the ejector down. As the bolt opens, that ejector is going to slide right up this track, hit the empty case, and kick it out of the gun. And so its spring is located inside this pad. And then these two are not screws, those are simply roll pins running through the gun from side to side that lock the barrel in place. This is a 5.85 inch, just under 6-inch barrel, 9mm parabellum, of course, and it comes with a tri-lug adapter, which I rather like, for quick detach suppressors. You can unscrew this and you have 1/2 by 28 threads underneath, so you can put on some other sort of muzzle device or direct thread suppressor or some other suppressor mount or whatever you want to put on it. And then there's a little bit of M-LOK slot space up at the front, as well as space, I believe, for a QD socket. Overall, I really like the handiness, I like the lightweight, I like the narrow, compact nature of the gun, I like the amount of modularity that's in here. I'm not a big fan of the trigger, it's not very good. I kind of wish it had an ambidextrous safety in it. But the big important parts are, how does it actually feel on the range? Does it provide that reduced felt recoil that the system ought to? And well, how would it compare to, let's say, the best, most popular, most proven roller delayed 9mm carbine on the planet, that being the MP5? Well, I'll tell you what, tomorrow we're going to go ahead and take this out on the range with a semi-auto H&K SP-5, exactly the same thing, just semi-auto, and we're going to do some time trial testing and see how those two actually compare. So stick around tomorrow for that video. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching.